The rain struck so like a warning, sharp, cold, and unrelenting. Lily ran. Her cheap black flats slapped against the wet pavement as she rushed through the narrow alley behind the Kang ancestral residence, holding her maid apron against her chest so it wouldn't soak. Her breath came in short bursts, visible in the cold night air. The street lamps flickered like they were afraid of the darkness gathering around them. She didn't dare look behind her, not after what she saw, not after what she heard. "Miss Lily!" one of the guards had yelled earlier, his boots pounding toward her, his voice echoing through the marble hallway. She wasn't supposed to overhear the conversation. She wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the West Wing. The last time a staff member walked into the wrong room, they disappeared. Permanently. But today, she heard it. The truth. The truth that Kang Do-Hyun, the man the world believed to be a retired tycoon, was dying. And not just dying, he had a last wish. A wish that involved her. Lily wiped her wet hair away from her face, her dark curls heavy with water. Her skin glowed under the streetlights, the rain making her look like she stepped straight out of tragedy. Wide dark eyes, trembling lips, and the expression of someone carrying a secret too heavy for her size. 24 years old, broke, alone in Korea, and now she was caught in the center of its deadliest Mafia dynasty. She reached the corner of the alley and stumbled to a stop, gripping the side of a vending machine. Her heart thundered in her ears. Why me? Why her? The door behind her burst open. Lily! She gasped and spun around. It wasn't the feared guards. It wasn't the syndicate. It was the old man himself. Kang Do-Hyun. He stood under the rain with no umbrella, wearing only a charcoal hanbok robe, the silk clinging to his frail but tall frame. At 82, he had the presence of a king in the eyes of a man who had seen war, betrayal, and death 1,000 times. The rain didn't dare fall on him too harshly, as if the heavens themselves respected him. Lily froze. She could barely breathe. He stepped closer. His silver hair was soaked, plastered against his forehead, but his voice was steady. "Why are you running from me?" he whispered. "When you are the only one I trust?" Lily's lips trembled. "Sir, I heard something I shouldn't have." "Yes," he cut in softly. "You did." A flash of thunder illuminated the sky. Lily stepped back instinctively. He stepped forward. There was no anger in his face, only sorrow, loneliness, and something Lily had never seen in him before. Desperation. "Kang Do-Hyun," she whispered, afraid. "Please, I'm just a maid. I clean floors." "You are not just a maid," he said, his voice dark and low, powerful even in weakness. "You are the only person who has looked at me without fear." Her stomach tightened. She didn't know what he meant. She didn't want to know. He took another step, his old but strong hands trembling as he reached out and gently touched her shoulder, an action so soft it felt wrong coming from a legendary Korean Mafia boss. "Lily," he murmured, rain streaming down his face like tears he refused to shed. "I am dying." She swallowed hard. She already knew. "There is no one left to inherit my empire," he continued. "No son, no daughter, no bloodline, no legacy." Lily felt her heartbeat stop. He held her gaze with an intensity that cut through her. "My last wish," he whispered, "is to have an heir." The rest of the world fell away. Lily's mouth parted in shock. "No," she said immediately, shaking her head. "No, no, no. Sir, I can't do anything like that. I'm not. I have lived my entire life without touching a woman," he said, his voice breaking for the first time in his life. "I have never married, never allowed myself the weakness of love, never allowed myself joy or closeness or warmth." Lily felt her knees weaken. "But now," he said, a single tear mixing with the rain, "I have nothing. And when I close my eyes for the last time, all I will leave behind is a blood-soaked empire waiting for wolves." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his voice quieter. "I want a child, a legacy, someone who will live beyond my sins." He looked at her as if she were the last light in his dying world. "And I want you to carry my heir." Lily felt the earth tilt beneath her feet. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why me?" His answer came instantly. "Because you are pure in ways I never was. Because you serve not out of fear but kindness. Because every morning you greet me with a smile even though you don't have to. Her eyes filled with tears. And because, he added in a broken exhale, you're the only person in this house who sees Kang Do-Hyun the man, not the monster. A gust of wind hit them both. A car engine revved in the distance. Somewhere inside the mansion, angry voices rose. They were looking for her. Do-Hyun's expression hardened. They will try to stop my final wish, he said. They will come for you. They already have. Lily felt ice crawl down her spine. His hand slid from her shoulder to her wrist, gripping gently but firmly. If you honor my last wish, he said quietly, I will protect you with what remains of my life. Her breath caught. Thunder cracked across the sky. The door to the alley burst open again. Guards flooded out, shouting. Do-Hyun's grip tightened. Lily, he whispered. She stared at him, terrified, conflicted, breathless. Run with me. The guards were getting closer. Lily's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the rain. And then one of the guards yelled, The chairman is outside with the girl. Get her. Do-Hyun turned sharply, his voice dropping to a deadly note that shook the alley. Touch her, and I will end every one of you. The guards froze. Lily trembled. Do-Hyun looked back at her, eyes almost pleading. Choose, Lily, he said softly. Do you leave me to die without an heir, or do you fulfill a dying man's final wish? The rain fell harder. The guards reached for their weapons. Do-Hyun held her wrist. Lily's lips parted. Her answer trembled on her tongue. And then the screen would cut to black. The world felt suspended in the rain-soaked alley. Lily stood frozen between two impossible futures, her breath sharp, her clothes soaked, her heart beating like it was trying to escape her chest. Kang Do-Hyun's fingers were still wrapped around her wrist, not forcefully, but with a fragile kind of dependence, as if letting go would shatter him. The guards hovered several feet away, unsure, tense, waiting for an order they were too afraid to follow. The night air carried the metallic scent of impending violence. Lily swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know what to do. Do-Hyun stepped closer, his voice softer, lower. You already do, he said. Your heart knows. Her heart? Her heart was racing so fast she could barely hear her own thoughts. Behind them, the guards exchanged nervous glances. Chairman, sir, one of them finally managed. This is improper. The council has not approved any. Do-Hyun cut him a stare, so cold it froze the guard mid-sentence. I did not ask for your permission. The guard's mouth snapped shut. Do-Hyun's fingers gently lifted Lily's chin, so her eyes met his. I am not asking you to love me, he said quietly. I am asking you to help me die without regret. Her lips trembled. He continued, his voice breaking in places he could no longer control. All my life, I chose solitude, discipline, control, but now on the edge of the end. I finally understand that a life without someone to carry your story is no life at all. Lily felt the ache in his words, the loneliness, the fear he tried so hard to hide. She had seen him every morning, sitting alone in the vast dining hall, eating in silence, staring at the empty chair across from him, a man with everything, yet with nothing real. The guards advanced a step, but Do-Hyun raised a single hand, a small gesture, yet powerful enough to stop them all. Try to take her, he warned, and you become my enemy. The guards froze again. Lily's breath shuddered. Why do they want to stop me from staying with you? She whispered. Because, Do-Hyun replied, the moment I declare you the mother of my heir, you outrank every one of them. And they know it. Thunder rumbled. The power struggle was already beginning. Lily felt a flicker of something she hated. Fear. Not for herself, but for the war she felt forming around her. She was just a maid from Atlanta who came to Korea for a better life. She had no family here, no protection, no allies, and now she was at the center of an empire people would kill to control. Do-Hyun saw the terror in her eyes. Lily, he said gently, look at me. She hesitated. Look at me, he repeated, softer this time. She lifted her gaze, meeting his dark, tired but determined eyes. I will not let them harm you. His voice was iron. "I will burn the syndicate to the ground before I let one finger touch you." Her breath caught. "I don't want anyone hurt," she whispered. "Then stay with me," he replied. "And no one has to be." The guard stepped closer again, emboldened by Lily's hesitation. "Miss Lily, please," the chief guard said sternly. "Come with us. This conversation is inappropriate." Do-Hyun's voice snapped like a whip. "Silence." The guard instantly tensed, fists clenched by his sides. Do-Hyun turned back to Lily. "I am giving you a choice," he said, "not an order. If you walk away right now, I will not stop you. You will leave this alley alive. I swear it." Her heart pounded painfully. "But if you walk away," he added, "you walk away from protecting thousands of innocent lives. Because if I die airless, the syndicate will tear itself apart." He leaned in slightly, his voice barely audible over the rain. "And they will take their violence to the streets." Lily's eyes widened. "You're saying people will die because you don't have a child?" "Not a child," he corrected softly. "A successor." A breath of wind moved between them, sending her soaked hair across her face. "And you chose me?" she whispered. "Yes." "Why me?" He hesitated this time, and that hesitation made her chest tighten. "Because," he murmured, looking almost ashamed, "the first time you smiled at me, I wanted to live another day." Her breath stilled. Rain dripped off her eyelashes. She dared not move, dared not breathe. "I never felt that," he said. "Not in 8 decades. And I don't want to die without knowing that a piece of that light continues after me." His words wrapped around her like a quiet storm. Behind him, the guard shifted again, whispering urgently. They were losing control of the situation, and they knew it. Do-Hyun straightened, lifting his chin with the authority of a king whose time was running out. "I am leaving this residence tonight," he declared, with or without their approval. The guard stepped forward as one. "Chairman, you cannot leave." "Watch me." They froze again. Do-Hyun looked at Lily, extending his hand fully this time. "I will ask you once," he said. "Only once." A wave of rain swept through the alley like a final countdown. "Will you help me fulfill my last wish?" Lily's pulse hammered against her skin. Her stomach twisted. Her breath shook. This man was feared across the entire Korean underworld. A legend, a ghost, a hidden emperor. And yet here he was, old, dying, soaked in rain, begging her for something deeply human. Her throat tightened. She thought of the other maids whispering behind closed doors. The syndicate politics. The dangers. Her empty apartment. Her loneliness. Her dream of belonging somewhere. Anywhere. She looked at his hand. She looked at the guards, ready to pounce the moment she said no. She looked back at Do-Hyun. His eyes softened when she raised her hand, just slightly, toward his, but before her fingers could touch his palm. A gunshot split the air. The sound was sharp, brutal, echoing off the alley walls. Lily screamed. Do-Hyun's arm snapped around her waist, pulling her behind him in one swift motion, despite his age. The guards lunged forward in chaos. Another gunshot. Glass shattered nearby. Someone was attacking. Lily clutched the back of Do-Hyun's robe, trembling violently. The scent of gunpowder filled the alley. Footsteps pounded in the darkness. The guard shouted, running toward the shooter. Do-Hyun held Lily tightly against his chest, his heartbeat steady against her ear. His voice dropped to a whisper, dangerous and emotional. "You see now, Lily? Even my dying wish threatens their power." Another gunshot echoed. Another scream. Chaos erupted. Do-Hyun leaned down, his lips beside her ear. "I will keep you alive," he said. "But you must choose. Now." Lily's body shook. Her voice came out broken, terrified, but clear. I choose." A shadow appeared at the edge of the alley. Someone aimed a gun. At Lily. Do-Hyun's eyes widened. He shoved her sideways, and the screen would cut abruptly. The world moved in slow motion. The moment Do-Hyun shoved Lily out of the gun's path. She stumbled, her hand scraping against the wet pavement, rain splashing against her face. A violent crack of thunder rolled above them. drowning out the panicked shouts of guards as another bullet sliced the air. Do-Hyun didn't flinch. He stepped in front of her again, an old lion refusing to fall, refusing to show fear, refusing to let anyone see how close the shadows were creeping around him. "Lily, don't move," he whispered, his voice steady despite the chaos behind it. She trembled. Someone's trying to kill us." "Not us," he corrected. "Me." But his eyes softened. "And anyone, I choose to stand beside me." The shooter stepped forward, just a silhouette in the rain-blurred darkness, a tall figure in a hooded jacket, boots hitting the ground with slow, deliberate confidence, not rushing, not panicking. Whoever it was, this attacker was used to killing, used to fear, used to watching people run. But Do-Hyun didn't run. He stood his ground, shoulders squared, his wet hair clinging to his forehead, his breath steady. Lily felt a wave of pure dread crash into her. "No, no, no. Chairman Kang, please, let's just leave." "Leave," he murmured, "and show them I'm weak?" A bullet exploded into the wall beside him. Lily screamed again, covering her head. Still, Do-Hyun didn't bow, didn't kneel, didn't bend. He took one single step forward. "Reveal yourself," he commanded. The figure hesitated, then lifted the gun again, this time pointed directly at Lily. Do-Hyun's entire body stiffened. "Don't," he growled, a warning that carried decades of bloodshed in its tone. The hooded figure tilted their head slightly, as if amused, then aimed lower. Lily's chest tightened, her breath choked, her vision blurred with terror. Why her? Why point the gun at her? Do-Hyun took one step forward, blocking the line of fire completely. "If you harm her," he said quietly, "I will make your family disappear before morning." The shooter's finger hovered on the trigger. Thunder cracked again, echoing through the narrow alley. The guards finally reached the attacker. They lunged, tackling the figure to the ground in a violent struggle. The gun skidded across the pavement. Lily gasped as one guard slammed the attacker against the wall, pinning them with a forearm. "Chairman, we've subdued." Do-Hyun didn't look away from Lily. His eyes were darker now, more dangerous, but also more afraid. Not for himself, for her. He knelt down beside her, ignoring the groans of the restrained shooter behind them. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was softer than she expected. Lily shook her head, even though her hands wouldn't stop trembling. I'm okay," she whispered, "just shaken." His gaze traveled down her arms, noticing the small scrapes, the bruised palms, the way her wet clothes clung to her trembling body. He reached out, brushing a wet strand of hair from her cheek. "You are not safe here," he said. "Not anymore." "Because of you," she whispered, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "Because of us," he corrected. She swallowed hard, heart pounding. "Who would want to kill me?" she asked. He exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that meant the truth would hurt. "Anyone," he said, "who wants my throne." She stared at him. "But I'm just a maid." "You are not just anything," he replied. "The moment I chose you, the war began." He helped her stand, steadying her with a gentleness that didn't match his reputation. "Chairman," one of the guards said urgently, dragging the attacker forward, "the shooter refuses to speak." Do-Hyun didn't turn. He didn't acknowledge them at all. He kept his attention locked fully on Lily. "Look at me," he said. She lifted her eyes. His voice lowered, becoming something intimate, something fragile. "What were you going to say before the bullet came?" he asked. "You said, 'I choose.'" Her heart dropped to her stomach. The question she wasn't ready to answer. Her mouth parted, but no words came out. He didn't pressure her. He simply stepped closer, lowering his forehead until it nearly touched hers, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath despite the cold rain between them. "We leave," he said quietly. "Now. But not back to the residence," he added. "It's no longer safe." Lily swallowed hard. "Then where?" "To a hidden estate, a place no one knows." He paused. "Except me?" Lightning illuminated the alley once more, casting sharp shadows across his broad shoulders. The guard stiffened at his next command. "Prepare the car. We depart immediately. One guard hesitated. Chairman, the council will... Do-Hyun's gaze snapped to him, sharp enough to cut steel. The council, he said evenly, can rot. The guard bowed instantly. Do-Hyun turned back to Lily. Come, he whispered. She hesitated. Not because she didn't trust him, but because her mind was trying to process the impossible shift in her life. She came to Seoul to earn money, to send some back home, to survive. She never imagined an 82-year-old Mafia legend would pull her into the heart of a deadly inheritance war. She took a step forward. Her ankle buckled. Do-Hyun caught her before she fell, his arms wrapping around her waist. His breath brushed her ear as he steadied her. I have you, he murmured. She shivered, not from the rain, from him. But before they could take another step, the guard suddenly shouted, Chairman, wait! Do-Hyun turned sharply. The attacker had stopped struggling. Despite the bruises, despite being restrained, the hooded figure lifted their head and looked directly at Lily. Then they spoke their first words of the night. Do you think, the attacker rasped, blood dripping down their chin, that protecting her will save your empire? The guards tightened their grip. Do-Hyun's jaw tensed. The attacker laughed weakly. You're already dying, Kang Do-Hyun. And when your heart stops beating, that woman will be the first we come for. Lily's blood went cold. Do-Hyun's eyes became merciless ice. He took a step forward. The guards held their breath. Lily watched the transformation in real time, how the man who held her hand moments ago became something primal, something ancient, something lethal. Do-Hyun knelt in front of the attacker. He spoke in a tone Lily had never heard from him, soft, calm, and terrifying. You made one mistake tonight. The attacker spit blood at his feet. And what's that? Do-Hyun leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. You threaten the only reason I still breathe. Silence. Even the rain seemed to pause. The attacker's smirk vanished. Do-Hyun stood slowly, straightened his soaked coat, and gave a single command to his men. Make sure no one finds him. The guards dragged the attacker away. Lily's legs nearly gave out again. Do-Hyun stepped to her, his voice returning to something human. We leave now, he said. Every minute we stay here is a minute they plan your death. Her breath hitched. Why me? She whispered again, desperate, shaking. His answer came with no hesitation. Because you are the only person whose existence terrifies them. A beat passed, and the only person whose existence keeps me alive. A black car rolled into the alley, headlights slicing through the rain. Do-Hyun extended his hand. This time, she didn't hesitate. But the moment her fingers touched his palm, a phone rang. Do-Hyun froze. He rarely froze. He answered slowly, putting the device to his ear. Lily watched his expression shift from confusion and anger to something she never expected. Fear. He lowered the phone. His voice was barely a breath. Lily, he said, we're too late. She blinked. Too late for what? He swallowed. They already put a bounty on your head. Her heart dropped. How much? She whispered. Do-Hyun looked straight into her eyes. Enough, he said, to make every killer in Korea come for you. Before she could react, before she could breathe, someone stepped from behind the car. Someone holding a blade. Someone smiling. Found you, the stranger whispered. And Lily's scream tore through the night. The penthouse was silent, too silent. Only the distant hum of the city seeped through the bulletproof windows as Elijah stood frozen, his eyes locked on Ji-Hyun's trembling form. For the first time, Elijah didn't look like a maid. She looked like someone cornered by destiny. Jaewon Hwang, the last remaining patriarch of the Hwang syndicate, stared at her with an expression that was neither lust nor hunger, but certainty, a certainty that shook her bones. I choose you. His voice was deep, steady, terrifyingly calm. Elijah's heart slammed against her ribs. "Why me?" she whispered. "Out of all the women in Korea, out of all the powerful families, why would your heir come from me?" Jae-won didn't blink. Because the women from powerful families don't want a child, they want a throne. He stepped closer. And I will not give my child a mother whose first loyalty is ambition. Elijah swallowed. So you pick a maid? A maid who works hard, he said softly. A maid who doesn't lie. A maid who doesn't tremble when Mafia bosses walk past. A maid who looks me in the eyes without fear. He paused. And a maid who risked her job to bring me soup last month when I was sick. Elijah blinked. She never thought he noticed that moment. Jae-won continued. I am dying, Elijah. I have months, maybe less. My legacy cannot die with me. He took a breath. I need an heir, but more importantly, I need the right mother for that heir. Elijah shook her head. This is crazy. I just want to make money and send it back home. I didn't ask for a kingdom, he interrupted. No, you didn't. That is why you're worthy of it. His words hit her harder than gunfire. She stepped backward, overwhelmed. What if I say no? Jae-won's jaw tightened just slightly. Then I will accept it. But understand this. His eyes, dark and ancient with pain, softened like she'd never seen. You will be the last person I ever asked for anything. A knock on the door. Sharp. Urgent. Sung-ho rushed in, eyes wide. Boss! We found the traitor. He's inside the building. Jae-won's entire aura flipped from vulnerable to lethal. Lock down the top floor, he ordered. No one comes near Elijah. Elijah gasped. Near me? But why? Because if my enemies discover you might carry the next Hwang heir, his eyes turned cold. They will come for you first. Her blood turned to ice. Jae-won turned to her one last time. Think carefully, Elijah. This is not just about a child. It's about surviving long enough to have one. And then, boom, a gunshot exploded from the elevator shaft. Screams echoed. Sung-ho drew his gun. Jae-won moved Elijah behind him in one swift motion, shielding her with his entire body. Because that was the moment. The entire Hwang syndicate learned their dying boss might have chosen his future. And Elijah? She realized this was no longer a choice. It was a war. The lights trembled above Elijah's head as if the penthouse itself had begun to breathe with fear. The echo of the first gunshot was still pulsing in her ears. She didn't even realize she had grabbed the back of Kang Do-Hyun's shirt until he turned slightly and she felt the tension in his muscles, tight and coiled like a predator ready to strike. The silence that followed was horrible, a kind of silence that felt alive, creeping across the walls. Then Sung-ho spoke, voice low but sharp. He didn't break in, he muttered. Someone let him in. Do-Hyun's eyes changed. Something old and dangerous woke in them. Who? Sung-ho swallowed once, jaw tight. Min-jae. Elijah didn't know the name, but the moment it left his mouth, the air seemed to drop 10 degrees. Even the city lights outside the massive glass windows looked duller. Do-Hyun breathed out slowly, too slowly, as if he were controlling something violent inside him. Before Elijah could ask anything, another sound tore through the room, glass exploding, a bullet ripping through the vase near the dining table. Elijah let out a sharp breath and stumbled backward, but Do-Hyun caught her wrist and pulled her behind him. Stay close, he said softly. It wasn't gentle. It was a warning carved from granite. She nodded even though she wasn't sure her body was still capable of moving. Her heart felt like it was vibrating inside her chest, trying to escape. The footsteps came next, heavy, confident, slow. They didn't hide. They didn't rush. They took their time, as if the person walking already knew he owned the room. Sung-ho moved toward the door, gun raised. He's playing with us. He knows every blind spot. Do-Hyun's voice was a string pulled tight. He won't touch her. Elijah didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. The man she was hiding behind was 82, but he stood in front of her like a storm, like a tower, like someone who refused to die just because the world expected him to. The footsteps stopped. The doorknob turned. Then the door opened slowly, and a tall man stepped inside, the kind of tall that carried effortless arrogance. His hair shadowed part of his face, but not enough to hide the cold stillness in his eyes. Min-jae, he didn't look like someone breaking in. He looked like someone returning to a place he believed belonged to him. Boss, he greeted, almost respectfully. I'm only here for what should have always been mine. Do-Hyun didn't move. Why? Min-jae shrugged lightly, almost amused. You really have to ask? Years of loyalty serve as blood, and in the end you choose her. He tilted his chin toward Elijah. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't used to being scrutinized like that, as if her entire existence offended him. A foreign maid? Min Jae scoffed. This is who you're giving the future to? Elijah felt Do-Hyun shift. He stepped half a pace forward, blocking her view of Min Jae completely. You don't speak her name, he said quietly, let alone judge her. Something glittered in Min Jae's eyes, something dark and tainted. Oh, so the rumors were true. A slow, poisonous smile spread across his face. She's the one you chose to carry your heir, the one who will inherit everything I built for you. You built nothing, Do-Hyun replied. The calm in his voice was more frightening than if he had screamed. Min Jae lifted his gun. His gaze locked on the small shadow of Elijah behind the boss. This is your last chance, Do-Hyun warned. Leave. But Min Jae simply tilted his head, like a wolf studying wounded prey. No, boss, he whispered. You've lived long. You've ruled long. Now it's time to give me the future, and take back what you stole. His finger tightened on the trigger, starting with her. Everything happened at once. Sung-ho shouted, down! A gunshot split the air. Elijah felt Do-Hyun grab her shoulders, pulling her hard toward the floor as bullets exploded across the marble wall behind them. Pieces of tile shattered and rained over their backs. She inhaled dust, fear, and the warm scent of Do-Hyun's coat all at once. More shots. The room filled with smoke and chaos. Sung-ho tried to move forward, firing twice, but Min Jae ducked behind the kitchen counter and moved with terrifying precision. This wasn't a rookie desperate for attention. This was someone trained, someone who knew Do-Hyun's defenses better than anyone still alive. Sung-ho cried out suddenly, clutching his shoulder as a bullet grazed him. He stumbled, dropping to one knee. Do-Hyun dragged Elijah backward, his voice low but steady. We're moving. Now. But before they could reach the hallway, Min Jae appeared there, emerging from the smoke like a shadow that refused to die. He moved silently, not a single footstep giving him away. Elijah froze. He was blocking their escape. His gun lifted again, aimed directly at her heart. You were never meant to be part of this, he told her. You shouldn't have been chosen. You shouldn't even be here. Do-Hyun stepped in front of Elijah fully, his arms spreading slightly, shielding her with his entire body. If you want her, he said, you'll have to kill me. The words hit the room like thunder. Min Jae smiled, not cruelly. Worse, sincerely, gladly. What Elijah felt next was not fear. It was something colder. A realization that the man pointing a gun at them didn't care if she screamed, begged, or cried. He didn't see her as human. He saw her as a vessel, a problem, a mistake, a womb, and he would kill anyone in his way. Min Jae's finger curled on the trigger. Do-Hyun didn't move. Neither did Elijah. For a split second, time seemed to pause. The gun went off, and Elijah flinched, but the bullet didn't hit. A loud metallic clang echoed from the left as something crashed into Min Jae, making his shot go wide. The bullet struck the chandelier instead, sending shattered crystal scattering like falling stars. Elijah didn't see who tackled Min Jae, only that Do-Hyun grabbed her hand and yanked her toward the far door. She stumbled after him, breath shaking, lungs burning. They ran across the penthouse, stepping over broken glass and bullet casings. Smoke filled the air. Sung-ho was yelling something behind them, but she couldn't hear. All she knew was Do-Hyun's hand tightening around hers. They reached the hallway just as Min Jae roared in fury behind them. Elijah glanced back and saw his silhouette emerging from the smoke again, relentless, unstoppable. Do-Hyun opened a hidden panel in the wall, a door Elijah never even noticed before, and pushed her inside. The room was small, dim, made of reinforced steel. A panic room. Stay behind me, he said again, voice shaking for the first time. Not with fear, with rage. Min Jae's footsteps pounded closer. Elijah pressed herself against the cold wall, gripping her chest as her heartbeat thundered. Do-Hyun stood directly between her and the door, gun raised. The handle turned. Slowly, deliberately. Elijah's breath caught as the door began to open, and Min-jae stepped into the narrow light, smiling through the smoke. "I'm not leaving," he whispered, "without the child who will rule this empire." Do-Hyun pulled the trigger. The room exploded in sound. The gunshot shook the panic room, the sound ricocheting off the steel walls like thunder trapped in a cage. Elijah covered her ears as sparks flew from the metal doorframe. Min-jae staggered back, a bullet grazing his cheek in a thin, violent line. Blood trickled down, but he didn't scream. He didn't even flinch. He just smiled. Not the smile of someone defeated, but the smile of someone who had expected this and planned around it. In the next second, Min-jae lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into the panic room door before Do-Hyun could fire again. The impact shoved the older man backward slightly, but he held his stance, jaw clenched, gun aimed. "Move again," Do-Hyun warned, "and I'll end you." Min-jae chuckled breathlessly. "You can barely stand, old man." Elijah looked at Do-Hyun then, really looked. His breath was heavier. His hand shook slightly under the harsh white lights of the panic room. The faint tremor in his fingers was more visible than ever. The illness he had spoken of, it was real, near, closer than she'd allowed herself to accept. Min-jae noticed it too, like a predator sensing weakness. "You're dying," he whispered, "and you think you can protect her?" Elijah felt Do-Hyun shift, put his body directly in front of her again. Even if it destroyed him, he would not move. "I can," he said quietly, "and I will." Min-jae smirked. "Then let's see how long you last." He raised his gun. Do-Hyun fired first. The shot struck Min-jae in the shoulder, spinning him back into the hallway. Elijah gasped as he hit the wall with a curse. Smoke filled the air. Do-Hyun slammed the panic room door shut with his remaining strength and locked it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elijah pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her pulse racing so loudly she could barely hear anything else. She slid down the wall, her knees trembling. Do-Hyun's gun lowered slowly. His breathing was ragged now, each inhale sounding heavier than the last. When he turned toward her, Elijah saw something she'd never seen before. Exhaustion, pain, a flicker of fear behind the steel in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "I'm fine. What about you?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pressed one hand against the wall to steady himself. His other hand lifted to his chest, fingertips brushing over the scar Elijah had seen the night before. His face tightened in a grimace he tried to hide. "You're wounded," she whispered. No, his voice was too sharp, too defensive. "This is nothing." He took a single step forward, then swayed. Elijah lunged, catching his arm. "Sit," she begged. "Please, just sit for a second." But Do-Hyun resisted, trying to pull away. "I can't. I need to. I need to make sure." "Do-Hyun." Her voice cracked. He froze. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked human, not untouchable, not immortal, just a man holding himself together with sheer will. Elijah guided him to the bench built into the wall. She kept one hand on his shoulder until he finally lowered himself onto it. He exhaled shakily, closed his eyes for a moment as if the world was pressing down on him. Elijah knelt in front of him, hands trembling. "You're not okay," she whispered. Do-Hyun opened his eyes and looked at her, not with anger, not with pride, but with something deeper, something she didn't want to name. "Min-jae won't stop," he said quietly. "He will come back for you. He thinks killing you will erase me from the future." Elijah swallowed hard. "Why me? Why does he hate me so much?" Do-Hyun stared at her as if the answer was too complicated for words. But he tried anyway. "Because I chose you," he said finally. "And in this world, what I choose is consequences." Elijah looked down. Her throat ached. She didn't feel worthy of being chosen by anyone, especially not someone like him. A sudden clang slammed into the door, shaking the entire room. Elijah jerked. Do-Hyun stood instantly, pushing her behind him again. Another slam. Minji's voice leaked through the steel, muffled but venomous. "You can't hide forever, boss." Do-Hyun raised his gun, jaw locked. Elijah grabbed his arm. You'll collapse, she whispered urgently. You need help. There is no help, he said. There's only survival. She shook her head. You said you were leaving everything to an heir. But an heir doesn't matter if you die right now. That silence struck the room like lightning. Do-Hyun didn't look at her. He didn't need to. She could feel the weight of his thoughts, the heaviness of a decision pressing on him. Elijah, he said softly, if something happens to me— Don't, she interrupted. Don't talk like that. But he continued anyway. If something happens, you run. You keep running until Sung-ho finds you, and you let him take you to the vault. Everything you need to survive is there. Stop. You will live, he said firmly, even if I don't. Elijah grabbed the front of his shirt, voice trembling. I don't want to survive without you. His eyes widened. For a moment, neither of them breathed. It was the closest they had ever come. Not physically, but emotionally. A collision neither of them were prepared for. Another violent bang shook the door. Screws rattled. The metal bent. Min-jae was trying to break in. Do-Hyun stepped back in front of her, raising his gun again. Elijah pressed her forehead against his back, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. Don't leave me, she whispered. He whispered back, so softly she almost didn't hear it. I won't unless I have no choice. The next slam bent the door inward, a crack splitting along the hinge. Light seeped through the gap as Min-jae forced it wider. Elijah gasped as his eye appeared in the gap, wild with obsession. Found you. Do-Hyun cocked his gun, muscles coiling as he prepared for one final standoff. Elijah grabbed his arm again. Do-Hyun, wait. But he didn't wait. He stepped forward, just as the door burst open and Min-jae charged through it, and the three of them collided in a storm of steel and fury. The room was a battlefield of silence. Smoke curled from the shattered chandelier overhead, catching the dim light like a storm trapped in crystal. Elijah's chest heaved, the adrenaline still scorching through him, while Do-Hyun's hand clung to his arm, trembling but steady. You can't just— Do-Hyun started, but the words caught his throat. Elijah's jaw tightened. His eyes, dark and stormy, locked onto Do-Hyun's. I just saved you. Do you even realize what that cost me? Do-Hyun swallowed hard, the weight of the near-death choice pressing on him. I know, and I— Before he could finish, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway. Shadows flitted along the broken walls. Elijah instinctively stepped in front of Do-Hyun, his body a shield, his mind already calculating escape routes, vulnerabilities, and threats. Stay behind me, he hissed, voice low but lethal. Do-Hyun's hand found Elijah's again, gripping tightly. The moment wasn't just fear. It was something else, something neither of them dared name aloud. I don't care about danger anymore, Do-Hyun whispered, voice trembling. Not if I'm with you. Elijah's eyes softened for the briefest instant, a crack in the armor of the man everyone feared. You really shouldn't say things like that, he muttered, though the corner of his mouth twitched into a ghost of a smile. The first figure appeared at the doorway, a man with a gun raised, eyes wide in shock at the scene. Elijah reacted in a blur, moving faster than Do-Hyun could follow, disarming the intruder in a single, fluid motion. But the moment the gun clattered to the floor, Elijah's foot slipped on the spilled wine, sending him crashing toward Do-Hyun. Time slowed. Do-Hyun caught him instinctively, their foreheads brushing, breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. For a heartbeat, the chaos outside ceased to exist. I can't, Elijah started, but Do-Hyun silenced him with a fierce, almost desperate whisper. Don't. Not now. Not after this. Elijah froze, torn between duty, danger, and the raw intensity of what was happening. Then, slowly, almost painfully, he let himself fall into that closeness, letting the moment burn into memory. The footsteps outside grew louder, voices shouting, but for the first time, neither of them moved to run. They were anchored to each other, bound not by fear or obligation, but by something far more dangerous. Desire, trust, and a connection neither had expected to survive. And just as the first scream of chaos broke through the door, Elijah leaned in, voice low and rough. If we survive this, you're mine. No excuses. Do-Hyun's answer was breathless. Then, I'm yours. The world outside the room could wait. Inside, for once, nothing else mattered. The door burst open with a deafening crash. Shadowed figures poured in, weapons raised, and the room erupted into chaos. Glass shattered under flying fists, and a metallic scent of blood and fear filled the air. Elijah's grip on Do-Hyun tightened instantly. Stay close. Don't move an inch, he growled, scanning the room with lethal precision. Do-Hyun's chest pressed against Elijah's, heartbeat hammering. How many of them are there? Elijah's jaw clenched. Too many, but we'll make them regret every step they take. A sudden flash from a gun ignited the darkness. Do-Hyun ducked instinctively, only to find Elijah shielding him with his body. The impact threw them both backward, Do-Hyun's arm scraping against a jagged shard of glass. Pain shot through him, but his focus never wavered from Elijah. You shouldn't risk yourself for me, Do-Hyun gasped, pressing a hand to Elijah's chest as if trying to anchor him. I'd die 1,000 times for you, Elijah snapped, eyes blazing, before launching himself toward the nearest threat. The fight was brutal, raw, and immediate. Elijah moved like a predator, taking down enemies with precision that left Do-Hyun both terrified and entranced. Every punch, every dodge, every movement was a calculated risk, but it was clear Elijah wouldn't let anything touch him. Then came the voice, a calm, chilling drawl that froze them both in place. I see you've grown bold, Elijah. A man stepped from the shadows, tall, imposing, and radiating a threat Elijah knew all too well. The man's eyes flicked to Do-Hyun, lingering in a way that made Elijah's blood run cold. Do-Hyun, stay behind me, Elijah warned, his hand tightening on the other man's throat. But Do-Hyun refused to move. No, I'm not leaving you, he said, his voice steady, even as the stranger's gaze sent a shiver down his spine. The intruder smiled, a slow, cruel curve of his lips. Very brave, but bravery won't save you. Not this time. Before Elijah could react, the man lunged. Elijah blocked him, the force of the impact throwing both men backward. Do-Hyun leapt forward instinctively, catching Elijah as he fell. But their closeness was interrupted when another attacker aimed a gun at them. Time slowed. Do-Hyun's eyes met Elijah's, full of unspoken words, fears, and unyielding trust. And in that instant, Elijah realized something terrifying and exhilarating. He couldn't protect Do-Hyun if he lost control of himself. With a roar that shook the room, Elijah pushed off Do-Hyun, spinning into a flurry of attacks that left their enemies reeling. Do-Hyun's hand stayed near Elijah's, brushing against him with every move, a silent promise neither wanted to break. And then, just when it seemed they might survive, the tall stranger returned, this time with a knife glinting dangerously. Elijah froze for a fraction of a second, enough for the man to strike, and everything hung in the balance. Do-Hyun shouted, voice raw with desperation. Elijah! The world seemed to tilt. Everything depended on that next moment. The door burst open with a deafening crash. Shadowed figures poured in, weapons raised, and the room erupted into chaos. Glass shattered under flying fists, and a metallic scent of blood and fear filled the air. Elijah's grip on Do-Hyun tightened instantly. Stay close. Don't move an inch, he growled, scanning the room with lethal precision. Do-Hyun's chest pressed against Elijah's, heartbeat hammering. How many of them are there? Elijah's jaw clenched. Too many, but we'll make them regret every step they take. A sudden flash from a gun ignited the darkness. Do-Hyun ducked instinctively, only to find Elijah shielding him with his body. The impact threw them both backward, Do-Hyun's arm scraping against a jagged shard of glass. Pain shot through him, but his focus never wavered from Elijah. You shouldn't risk yourself for me, Do-Hyun gasped, pressing a hand to Elijah's chest as if trying to anchor him. I'd die 1,000 times for you, Elijah snapped, eyes blazing, before launching himself toward the nearest threat. The fight was brutal, raw, and immediate. Elijah moved like a predator, taking down enemies with precision that left Do-Hyun both terrified and entranced. Every punch, every dodge, every movement was a calculated risk, but it was clear Elijah wouldn't let anything touch him. Then came the voice, a calm, chilling drawl that froze them both in place. "I see you've grown bold, Elijah." A man stepped from the shadows, tall, imposing, and radiating a threat Elijah knew all too well. The man's eyes flicked to Do-Hyun, lingering in a way that made Elijah's blood run cold. "Do-Hyun, stay behind me," Elijah warned, his hand tightening on the other man's throat. But Do-Hyun refused to move. "No, I'm not leaving you," he said, his voice steady, even as the stranger's gaze sent a shiver down his spine. The intruder smiled, a slow, cruel curve of his lips. "Very brave, but bravery won't save you. Not this time." Before Elijah could react, the man lunged. Elijah blocked him, the force of the impact throwing both men backward. Do-Hyun leapt forward instinctively, catching Elijah as he fell, but their closeness was interrupted when another attacker aimed a gun at them. Time slowed. Do-Hyun's eyes met Elijah's, full of unspoken words, fears, and unyielding trust. And in that instant, Elijah realized something terrifying and exhilarating. He couldn't protect Do-Hyun if he lost control of himself. With a roar that shook the room, Elijah pushed off Do-Hyun, spinning into a flurry of attacks that left their enemies reeling. Do-Hyun's hand stayed near Elijah's, brushing against him with every move, a silent promise neither wanted to break. And then, just when it seemed they might survive, the tall stranger returned, this time with a knife glinting dangerously. Elijah froze for a fraction of a second, enough for a man to strike, and everything hung in the balance. Do-Hyun shouted, voice raw with desperation, "Elijah!" The world seemed to tilt. Everything depended on that next moment. Time froze for a heartbeat, the knife gleaming in the stranger's hand, the air thick with imminent death. Elijah's mind raced, calculating, reacting, but for once, instinct alone wasn't enough. Do-Hyun didn't hesitate. In a desperate, fearless move, he lunged, grabbing the stranger's wrist just as the knife descended. Pain shot through Do-Hyun's arm, but he held tight. "Not him," he screamed, eyes locked on Elijah. The moment of distraction was all Elijah needed. With a fluid, devastating motion, he swept the stranger off his feet, disarming him in a heartbeat and sending him crashing into a wall. The knife clattered across the floor. Do-Hyun stumbled back, breathing hard, his arm bleeding slightly, but he didn't release Elijah's gaze. You scared me," he admitted, voice trembling but raw with emotion. Elijah stepped close, brushing a hand against Do-Hyun's blood-smeared cheek. "You think I wasn't scared too?" His voice was rough, low, almost a growl, but his eyes betrayed a vulnerability he never showed anyone. "I can't lose you. Not like this. Not ever." Do-Hyun's lips parted, and for a moment, words failed him. The chaos of the room, the wreckage, the looming danger, all faded into the background. Only Elijah existed. Only this moment. Then, as if the universe had caught its breath, another threat emerged, a shadow from the corner, moving too fast to see clearly. Elijah reacted instantly, pushing Do-Hyun behind him, and a loud crash echoed as the figure hit the wall. Elijah's chest heaved. "We're not safe yet," he growled. But there was a tension between them now, an unspoken truth that nothing could erase. Do-Hyun reached up, pressing a trembling hand against Elijah's chest. "We will survive. Together." Elijah's gaze softened, and for a fleeting second, the hard, untouchable facade of the Mafia boss vanished. He tucked Do-Hyun close, resting his forehead against his. "Together," he whispered, almost like a vow. Outside, the sounds of retreating footsteps signaled the temporary victory. But inside that ruined room, among shattered glass and spilled wine, Elijah and Do-Hyun found a moment of clarity, and something more dangerous than any enemy, a connection neither could ignore, a bond forged in life-threatening fire. And as they stood there, clinging to each other amidst the wreckage, one thought burned in Elijah's mind louder than the chaos around them. He would do anything, risk everything, to keep Do-Hyun safe, even if it destroyed him. The chaos had subsided, but the adrenaline still coursed through their veins like wildfire. Elijah pressed Do-Hyun against his chest, feeling the rapid pulse beneath his fingertips. Every instinct screamed to protect him, to never let him go. But the brief calm was deceptive. A soft click echoed from behind them. Both men froze. Elijah's eyes narrowed, instincts flaring. From the shadows, a familiar figure stepped forward. One of Elijah's trusted lieutenants, someone he thought loyal, smiled coldly. "I was beginning to wonder if he'd make out alive," the man said. Elijah's hand shot to his side, gripping the hilt of a concealed dagger. "What are you doing here?" His voice was ice, deadly and controlled. The lieutenant's smile widened. "Just observing. You've grown careless. Elijah, bringing someone like him into our world, that was a mistake." His gaze lingered on Do-Hyun, and a shiver ran down Elijah's spine. Do-Hyun stepped slightly forward, defiance flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean by that?" he demanded, though every fiber was being screamed that this man was dangerous. Elijah's jaw tightened. "He's right about one thing. You don't belong in my world." His voice was low, warning, but beneath it was something more, a fear he couldn't voice, the fear of losing Do-Hyun to the very darkness he ruled. The lieutenant's hand twitched, and in an instant a gun appeared in his palm. "I think it's time someone reminded you where loyalty truly lies," he said, aiming at Elijah. Do-Hyun froze for a heartbeat, horror washing over him. Elijah. But Elijah moved faster, closing the distance in a heartbeat, tackling the man to the ground. Metal clanged, and the struggle was brutal, their movements a deadly dance. Do-Hyun watched, heart pounding, every second stretching into eternity. When the lieutenant finally lay subdued, Elijah stood over him, chest heaving, eyes burning with controlled fury. "Anyone who threatens him, anyone dies." Do-Hyun's trembling hand reached for Elijah's, clutching it tightly. "I'm not leaving you," he whispered, voice raw with fear and determination. Elijah's expression softened, almost tender for the first time in hours. "I don't want you to," he murmured, pulling Do-Hyun into a tight embrace. "But my world, it's dangerous. I can't promise safety. Only this." His hand rested over Do-Hyun's heart. "I'll always fight for you. Always." Do-Hyun pressed closer, closing the gap between them, letting the fear, adrenaline, and raw emotion fuse into something undeniable. "Then we face it together," he said. Elijah's lips brushed Do-Hyun's temple, a silent vow. "Together," he echoed, voice low, almost a growl. Outside, the night remained silent, but inside, a war of loyalty, desire, and unspoken truths raged stronger than ever. And for the first time, Elijah knew that no threat, inside or out, would ever keep him from the one person who would become his world. The city slept under a blanket of rain, but Elijah and Do-Hyun felt no comfort in the night. The chaos from earlier had left scars on the building, shards of glass and pools of spilled wine, reflecting the flickering neon signs outside. But more than that, it left a lingering truth. Nothing in Elijah's world would ever be simple, and yet he couldn't imagine facing it without Do-Hyun. "Elijah," Do-Hyun whispered, voice hoarse from shouting in fear. "We can't stay here. They'll come back." Elijah's eyes, sharp and calculating, swept across the ruined room, noting every exit, every shadow, every potential threat. "You're right. We need to disappear, at least until I figure out who's behind this," he said, his voice calm but lethal. Every syllable carried the weight of authority, the kind that can make enemies hesitate and allies obey. Do-Hyun nodded, clinging to him as they stepped through the shattered doorway. Rain pelted their faces, soaking through their clothes, but it didn't matter. In that moment, they were not just two men fleeing danger. They were a force, an unspoken unit that no one could break. The streets were slick with rain and neon reflections, empty except for the occasional cab splashing through puddles. Elijah moved like a shadow, leading Do-Hyun through narrow alleys and hidden passages only he would know. "They think they can outsmart me," he muttered, voice low, eyes scanning every corner. "They're wrong, always wrong." Do-Hyun pressed closer, shivering. I've never seen you like this. You're unstoppable." His voice softened, tinged with awe and something deeper, something that made Elijah's chest tighten. And terrifying. Elijah's lips curved in a brief, grim smile. "I'm only terrifying when you're in danger," he admitted, almost reluctantly. "But with you, I'd face anything. Anyone." Do-Hyun's heart skipped, a rush of warmth cutting to the cold. wet night. Then we face it together, he said, echoing the promise they had made hours ago in the ruined room. Hours passed as they navigated the maze of the city. Elijah had contacts everywhere, friends, spies, people who owed him favors. Each interaction was brief, tense, and underlined with the threat of violence. Yet throughout it all, he never let go of Do-Hyun's hand, never allowed the distance between them to grow. The connection they had forged in near-death moments had become an anchor. Finally, they arrived at a safe house, an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. It was far from luxurious, but offered temporary reprieve. Elijah barred the doors and drew the curtains, creating a shadowed sanctuary where the outside world couldn't reach them, at least for a little while. Do-Hyun leaned against him, exhaustion catching up. Elijah, what now? Who's behind this? Why risk everything? His voice trembled with frustration, fear, and longing. Elijah sat on the edge of a cracked wooden table, pulling Do-Hyun close until they were chest to chest. His hand trailed down the other man's arm, squeezing gently. "It's never just one person in my world," he said, voice low, controlled, almost pained. "Enemies hide in the shadows. People you trust can betray you, and loyalty is more fragile than glass." Do-Hyun tilted his head, looking up at him. "And yet you trust me." Elijah's gaze softened, the steel in his eyes giving way to something rare and unguarded. "More than anyone else," he admitted, "because you're not part of this world. You're not corrupted by it. You remind me there's something worth fighting for beyond power, money, fear." Do-Hyun's fingers brushed against Elijah's cheek, tracing the faint scars that told stories of battles and betrayals. "Then we fight for us," he whispered, voice almost a plea. "I don't care what world we're in. I don't want to lose you." For the first time in a long while, Elijah allowed himself to show vulnerability. He pulled Do-Hyun close, pressing his forehead to his. "You won't. Not ever. I'll burn down the world if I have to. But I won't let anyone hurt you. Not your family, not your friends, not you." Hours slipped into silence. The rain outside turned into a steady drizzle. Their breaths mingled, their hearts beating in synchrony, and for a brief, fleeting moment, the chaos of Elijah's life seemed distant. It was almost normal, almost peaceful. But Elijah knew better. Danger never rested. And it wouldn't rest for them either. The sound came first, a whisper of movement outside the warehouse. Elijah's hand shot to the knife strapped at his waist. Do-Hyun froze, chest tightening with anticipation. A figure stepped into the dim light, tall, familiar, and radiating threat. Elijah's jaw clenched. "You." It was a man who had orchestrated the attack. The one who wanted Do-Hyun as leverage, as a pawn in a game Elijah refused to play. His lips curled into a smug smile. "Thought you could hide Elijah? Thought you could protect him forever?" Elijah didn't answer. He stepped in front of Do-Hyun, body coiled, ready to strike. But this time, the fight wasn't just physical, it was strategic. Every movement, every glance, every breath mattered. "You won't touch him," Elijah said, voice low, deadly. "Not tonight. Not ever." The man lunged and chaos erupted once more. The warehouse became a storm of fists, blades, and raw power. But Elijah was unstoppable. He moved with precision, every strike calculated, every maneuver honed by years in shadows. The enemy underestimated him. They always did. Do-Hyun, at first frozen, finally found courage in the storm. He grabbed a steel pipe, swinging with determination, striking one of the intruder's accomplices who had tried to flank them. Fear transformed into action, and together, they became a force that could not be broken. Minutes stretched like hours, and finally, Elijah faced a mastermind. Their eyes locked, a deadly silence passing between them. Then, with a fluid motion, Elijah disarmed him, the knife clattering across the wet floor. The man fell to his knees, breathing hard, defeated. Elijah didn't speak. He didn't need to. Do-Hyun stepped forward, pressing a hand against Elijah's chest. "It's over," he whispered. Elijah's jaw relaxed, the tension in his body slowly melting. He looked down at Do-Hyun, their faces inches apart, and finally allowed himself a smile, rare, unguarded, genuine. "It's over for now," he murmured. "But Nothing in my world is ever truly over. Only this I can promise you. Do-Hyun smiled back, a mixture of relief and love lighting up his eyes. Then promise me we'll face it together. No secrets, no running, no lies. Elijah cupped his face, pressing their foreheads together. Together, he vowed, voice rough but unwavering. Always together. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing away the traces of blood and violence, as if the city itself recognized their survival. Inside, Elijah and Do-Hyun held each other, the storm of their lives momentarily stilled. They had faced betrayal, danger, death, and yet they remained. Stronger, bound, unbreakable. And for the first time, Elijah realized that power, wealth, and fear meant nothing without someone to share it with. And Do-Hyun realized that even in the most dangerous world, love, wild, dangerous, all-consuming love, was worth every risk. The night stretched on, endless and serene. They stayed like that, arms entwined, hearts beating together. As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the horizon, Elijah whispered, almost to himself, "No one will ever take you from me. Not tonight. Not ever." Do-Hyun smiled, brushing a wet strand of hair from Elijah's face. "Then don't let go," he said softly. Elijah's hand rested over Do-Hyun's heart, and together they faced a world of shadows and danger, but also desire, trust, and a love that no darkness could extinguish. And in that moment, among the ruins and rain, they knew one undeniable truth. Whatever came next, they would face it together, because some bonds were forged not in safety, but in fire,